You have exactly 3 seconds to like and subscribe to the channel. Otherwise, I'll appear in your dreams tonight. To ask for a donation for that cup of coffee, link below.
Imagine you are standing in front of Leonardo da Vinci's masterpiece, the Mona Lisa, gazing up at the dazzling ceiling of Michelangelo's Sistine Chapel. World-changing words about the universe. This is not just history. This is a revolution in thinking. It was a Renaissance period when art, science, and philosophy flourished, illuminating the old continent after centuries of slumber. And so it became the foundation for European dominance throughout the world for centuries to come. But why is it? If you could get into a time machine and go back to a point in the past, Europe at that time would definitely be a terrible choice. You not only have to witness the brutality of endless wars, but also endure the harshness of the Catholic Church's social governance. It was in 470s that the collapse of the powerful Prussian Empire before the Prussian tribes plunged Europe into a dark and chaotic period of the middle. From a unified kingdom, the territory for the Lama dynasty was divided into many different regions. Vigos controlled Spain, Lam was in charge, Frank controlled the Dandruff. An angel and the sacrament set the stage in England. These tribes did not live in harmony with each other. Disputes and conflicts frequently occurred. Furthermore, the Black Death pandemic, like a fatal blow, claimed more than half of Europe's population, making the situation increasingly hopeless. In that shadow, the Catholic Church rose as a dominant, controlling the political, economic, and spiritual lives of the people. This power stifled intellectual development, as dissenting thinkers, like Galileo and Copernicus, were considered heretics and subjected to harsh punishments. All signs of progress in Europe seem to have stalled. But it was in the shadows that the seeds of progress quietly sprouted, ushering in a new era of the Renaissance. When the light of knowledge and art once again spread throughout Europe, the central idea of the system is the code. It is also where the Renaissance began in the 14th century and gradually spread throughout Europe, becoming a full-blown revolution. It was not only a revival of classical values from Greece and Rome, but also marked a turning point in how people thought about themselves and the world around them. If there were a time machine that could take you back to the chaotic and conservative Middle Ages, the Renaissance would certainly be the saving grace for this journey, an era where personal development, human and intellectual pursuits were placed at the center. Thinkers have glorified humanity as the center of the universe. It emphasizes the right to creative freedom and the ability to explore the world through reason and science. The return of intellectual enlightenment laid the foundation for many important innovations, from philosophy and politics to the arts. In the fields of ecclesiastical studies and politics, names like Erasmus, Thomas, and Niccolò Machiavelli left a profound mark with their works on monarchism. Machiavelli has brought a fresh perspective on power and leadership, challenging traditional thinking beyond just ideas. The Renaissance was also a time of great expeditions that changed history. Christopher Columbus discovered America. Vasco da Gama opened the sea route to India, and Ferdinand Magellan completed his circumnavigation of the world. These journeys not only expanded geographical boundaries but also gave Europe access to new civilizations. Science. The Renaissance served as a springboard for revolutionary discoveries. Nicolas Copernicus, with his heliocentric view, challenged the geocentric view that had existed for thousands of years and paved the way for the scientific revolution. Leonardo da Vinci was not only a painter known for his timeless masterpieces, but also a genius inventor who left behind hundreds of blueprints for mechanical gadgets. Many of them have become inspiration for modern technologies. This period was also a time of explosive growth for art and literature. Classic works not only enrich cultural life but also shape the thinking of their eras. The Renaissance was not only a revival of ancient values but also a catalyst for the remarkable development of modern art, science, and philosophical thought. The intellectual enlightenment brought Europe to a new level of progress, both for the continent and for humanity as a whole. The Industrial Revolution era. The Renaissance marked a significant turning point in how humanity viewed the world and its own role within it. While European society was previously constrained by the strict limitations of religion and conservative thinking, the Renaissance was like a breath of fresh air. Imagination and sparking creative thinking. The great figures of this era, from artists like Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo to brilliant scientists and philosophers like Galileo and Francis Bacon, all expressed dissatisfaction with known limitations. That very spirit became the guiding light for inventors in the following centuries, such as James Watt, who developed the steam engine, and the father of the modern factory system. Furthermore, the Renaissance was a time that brought about fundamental changes in how humans understood the natural world. Scientists like Copernicus, Galileo, and Johannes Kepler not only changed human understanding of the universe but also set new standards for scientific research. The scientific method developed by the pioneers became a powerful tool, later widely applied in the fields of engineering and technology. For example, the mechanical principles of Isaac Newton, a scientist deeply influenced by the Renaissance, became the foundation for the design and operation of complex machines, thereby driving the remarkable development of machinery during the Industrial Revolution. Furthermore, the trade routes discovered through geographical discoveries not only brought prosperity to Europe but also created an ever-increasing demand for larger-scale production of goods. This spurred technological advancements and improvements in production organization, laying the foundation for the emergence of modern factories and production systems. The scientific and technological advancements from that glorious era ushered in an era of European expansion throughout the world. The Renaissance led to a flourishing of science and commerce in Europe, giving rise to a new wealthy class, modern bourgeoisie. Their rapid population growth has led to an ever-increasing demand for resources, which the small landmass of Europe cannot adequately provide. This forced the great powers to seek more gold, silver, spices, and slaves from new lands. That marked the beginning of the colonial era that Europe waged throughout the world. The Europeans' breakthroughs in maritime technology, such as the compass, detailed, and versatile vessels, enabled them to cross oceans and explore distant continents. Famous explorers such as Christopher Columbus, Vasco da Gama, and Farina Magellan not only discovered new lands and ushered in an era of global, but they also laid the foundation for European colonial conquests. Throughout the following centuries, the exploitation and control of resources from the colonies perpetuated the wealth of the old continent. But in return, the indigenous peoples of the Americas, Africa, and Asia suffered brutal exploitation, lost their sovereignty, and their traditional cultures. Simultaneously, in Europe, the capitalist class increasingly asserted its position and transformed the social structure from feudalism to capitalism. They have become a leading force in shaping a new society based on market economics, industry, and continuous innovation. But it also indirectly led to serious consequences for few would believe that a glorious period like the Renaissance, which marked resurgence of literature, science, and art for all of Europe, was also the seat of divisions on the continent. The idea of the nation-state began to emerge in the 15th century as people's nations broke free from the tight control of the Catholic Church, while the role of the clergy in secular state structures diminished. At this time, nations were built upon their own distinct identities, laying the foundation for the formation of modern peoples. For example, according to research by scholar Felix Ding, from 18th, Emperor Friedrich Vincent III emphasized national spirit in his governing policies, thereby ensuring loyalty and inspiring fighting spirit in the newly annexed territory. Such policies permeated the lives of every family and significantly shaping the German national identity. However, the German, with their strong sense of pride in their long-standing culture and history, are finding themselves at a disadvantage compared to powerful nations like England and France. In particular, amidst the explosion of great geographical discoveries, these nations, within a vast network of colonies spanning the globe, quickly rose to become leading. High C had to find a way to position himself on the international political and economic map. From this point, colonial conflict between the great powers became increasingly tense and eventually erupted into world. But it didn't stop there. Nationalism became extreme. In particular, the emphasis on German identity once again became a catalyst for the Second World. This time, the war not only left devastating consequences but also caused far greater suffering and loss than the previous war. However, the remarkable advances in military science during the two world wars laid the foundation for subsequent technological revolutions, important inventions in the fields of physics, chemistry, and this paved the way for the development of modern weapons, from handguns, cannons to advanced military technologies, making wars even more intense. The Golden Age is considered the starting point for Europe's powerful rise, but no glorious period can last forever. The law of the strong prevailing is an unavoidable truth in the course of human history, and Europe, a modern, civilized Europe that had dominated the world for centuries, was now revealing its weaknesses and downward trends. After being devastated by two wars, Europe ceded dominant position to the United States in the latter half of the 20th century. For were considered the global standard, but now they are facing numerous challenges from various regions. With its grand ambitions, China is reasserting its position on the international stage. Chinese culture, once glorious in history, is now rising again with renewed strength. Along with Russia, China is promoting the BRICS bloc with the goal of reshaping the world order. They argue that which are heavily influenced by the US and Europe, even smaller nations strive to establish their own principles and values. Typically, ASEAN, an organization representing small and medium-sized countries, is striving to establish its own standards. This approach allows Viet Nam to avoid being drawn into the intense competition between the US and China while simultaneously asserting its position on the international stage. For example, countries wishing to participate in ASEAN mechanisms must accept the values and principles set forth by the organization. This helps ASEAN maintain its independence and demonstrate its leadership role in the region, while creating a stable and balanced environment for cooperation among major powers. Most of these countries, with the exception of Russia, were under European rule during the colonial era. However, over time they have risen strongly and continuously developed economically and socially. Europe, once the center of global power, is now gradually showing signs of crisis. From economic stagnation to instability in its political and social system, the lack of consensus within the European Union has created significant obstacles for the region in maintaining unity and strength. To face the increasing challenges, the public debt crisis in the early 2010s, financial foundations of the EU, particularly in South African countries like Greece and Italy, although the EU is trying to recover, the pace of its recovery is still much slower than that of the US and China. The European economy is also struggling with the influx of cheap goods from China, putting immense pressure on manufacturing sectors in the region. In addition, issues, population, education, and a shortage of young labor have further strained the socio-economic situation. In the past, Europe was considered a land of promise for immigrants from all over the world. However, the region is currently facing numerous problems related to racial discrimination and terrorism. Immigration waves from the Middle East, Africa, and South Asia have diversified Europe's population, but have also created cultural and social tensions, xenophobia and the rise of anti-immigration movements have divided European society, undermining solidarity that was once the region's strength. And what is most worrying is that the specter of war has returned to the continent. The conflict in Ukraine has had far-reaching impacts, particularly on countries in the region. Although these countries are making efforts to prevent the conflict from escalating, the situation remains highly unpredictable. All these factors are pushing Europe into a profound political crisis, the clearest manifestation of which is the collapse of many governments in the region's leading nations. The biggest challenge facing Europe today is whether it can find a way to adapt and reshape its role in the modern world. History has shown that no empire lasts forever, and decline does not necessarily mean the end. Asia remains an important cultural, intellectual, and political center of the world. If this region can overcome the current crisis, they can still maintain their position, although it may no longer be the sole dominant position it once held. Ham music.